Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Sotadishata Shri Srimat His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Antakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanande Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naran Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nasu Prayashidabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 6:3-13. Yo Namabir Vachi Janam Nijayam Badanti Tatriyam Iva Damabir Gaha Yasmai Bali Ta Ime Namakarma Nibanda Bandas Chakita Vahanti Yonamabir Vachi Janam Nijayam Mananti Tatram Ivadam Biragaha Yasmai Balim Vata Ime Namakarma Nibanda Bandas Chakita Vahanti Yonamabir Vachi Janam Nijayam Yasmai Bandanti Tatyam Ivadam Birgaha Yasmai Balim Ta Ime Namakarma Nibandha bandhas chakita vahanti. Yo nama birvachidanam nijayam. Vananti tatyam iva dhama virgaha. Yasmai balim ta ime nama karma. Nibandha bandhas chakita vahanti. Yo yaha he who namavihi by different names, vachi to the Vedic language, janam all people, nijayam which is emanated from himself, bananti binds, tatriyam to a rope, Iva like, Dhamabhihi by cords, Gaha bowls, Yasmai unto whom, Balim a small presentation of taxes, Te all of them, Ime these, Namakarma of names and different activities, Nibandha by the obligations, Bandhaha bound, Chakitaha being fearful, Vahanti carry. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As the driver of a bullock cart ties ropes to the nostrils of his bulls to control them, the Supreme Personality of Godhead binds all men to the ropes of His words in the Vedas, which set forth the names and activities of the distinct orders of human society, Brahmana, Satriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. In fear, the members of these orders will all worship the Supreme Lord by offering Him presentations according to their respective activities. Purport. In this material world, everyone is conditioned, regardless of who he is. One may be a human being, a demigod, or an animal, tree, or plant. But everything is controlled by the laws of nature. And behind this natural control is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is confirmed by the Bhagavad Gita, wherein Krishna says, Maya dakshena prakriti suyate sat characharam. The material nature is working under my direction in producing all moving and non-moving beings. Thus, Krishna is behind the natural machine, which works under his control. Apart from other living entities, the living being in the human form of life is systematically controlled by the Vedic injunctions in terms of the divisions of Varna and Ashrama. A human being is expected to follow the rules and regulations of Varna and Ashrama, otherwise he cannot escape punishment by Yamaraj. The point is that every human being is expected to elevate himself to the position of a Brahmana, the most intelligent man. Then one must transcend that position to become a Vaishnava. This is the perfection of life. The Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra can elevate themselves by worshiping the Lord according to their activities. Sway sway karmya birata samsidir labate nara. The divisions of Varna and Ashram are necessary to ensure the proper execution of duties in peaceful existence for everyone. But everyone is directed to worship the Supreme Lord who is all-pervading. Yena sarvam idam tatam. The Supreme Lord exists vertically and horizontally. Odam protam. And therefore, if one follows the Vedic injunctions by worshiping the Lord according to one's ability, his life will be perfect. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Atapum bir dvija shreshtas varnashrama vibhagashaha swanu anutistasya dharmasya samsadir haritoshanam. O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging his prescribed duties according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please Lord Hare. The Varnashram institution offers the perfect process for making one eligible to return home back to Godhead, because the aim of every Varna and ashram is to please the Supreme Lord. One can please the Lord under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master, and if one does so, his life is perfect. The Supreme Lord is worshipable, and everyone worships him directly or indirectly. Those who worship him directly get the results of liberation quickly, whereas the liberation of those who serve him indirectly is delayed. The words Nama, Bir, Vachi are very important. In the Varnashram institution, there are different names: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprashta, and Sannyasi. The Vach, or the Vedic injunctions, give directions for all these divisions. Everyone is expected to offer obeisances to the Supreme Lord and perform duties as indicated in the Vedas. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakoya Chakshurun Minitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swam Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopeshva Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudhe Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratwase Namaha Vancha kalpatarum visya kripa sindhu vacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pacharine, Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschajadeshatarine, Durgame Patiminantasya Sakalat Paragatir Muhur, Swakripa Yastidanena Santa Sanpavalambanam. So it's been very wonderful being in Pune again. I always feel at home whenever I come here, and I seek the blessings of all the senior Vaishnavas and all the junior Vaishnavas, that I can speak something that is enlightening for the heart and can inspire us to engage in devotional service in a more fixed way and simultaneously create a revolution within society at large. So Srila Prabhupada in this verse is discussing how, well, the verse itself is discussing how everyone is bound by the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, particularly in regards to how one is meant to behave and function within this world. So everyone in the material world is conditioned. Whether you're a demigod, whether you're an animal, whether you're a human being, everyone is functioning according to a conditioned understanding of who they are. Prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatman kartahamiti manyate. And they're thinking that under this conditioned existence of life that I'm free, that I'm not bound by any of my circumstances in life, and that I have independence and free will to do practically anything that I want. But actually it's just the opposite. According to how they've been conditioned in this world and how they've tried to exploit the resources of material energy, they're controlled by the things which they've tried to exploit. And according to that exploitative disposition, the material energy is awarding them particular bodies in order to facilitate the flavor of enjoying capacity that they have. Shariram yadavatnoti yadshapi krama ishvaraha. Chotram chakshus prasanamscha rasanam griham evacha adittasya manasaschayam visayam upasevate. That according to the way in which one has tried to exploit this world in the past, one receives a particular kind of body in which they can enjoy in the future. And this is carried from life to life, just as fragrance is carried by a flower. So the fragrance of how we've tried to enjoy this world is carried into the next life, and the material energy awards us with a particular kind of body. And like I said, the things which we try to exploit in this world becomes the things that control us. Purusha prakritisto hi ponkte prakritir jangunam kananam guna sango syat sadasad yoni janmasu. So if one tries to control a business, one considers himself to be a businessman and they become controlled by that business. If one tries to enjoy a cigarette, one becomes controlled by that cigarette. They're forced to smoke a cigarette. Man created iPhone and for the purpose of enjoying the iPhone, but that iPhone actually controls them. And so people develop ideas of who they are. People try to have a family, so they develop a conception that I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a husband. So according to how we enjoy in this world, the material energy awards us with a particular type of subtle body in order to perpetuate that existence. Because the pure spirit soul, its function isn't to enjoy. The function of the pure spirit soul is to serve. And so in order to reflect that pure serving capacity within the material world, and for order for the living entity to exist in that condition, the medium of the false ego takes place in order to function as a medium by which the living entity can exploit this material world. And according to the false ego that it's existing on a subtle plane, the material energy wards a particular kind of body. So we've been carrying this conception of life for lifetimes. We've experienced practically everything in existence. We've been cats, dogs, ants, insects, eagles, whatever you can name, you've probably been existing there. As George Harrison once said in a song, it's all been done and more. So we've experienced practically everything within the material world, and now we've come to the human form of life. Labvasta durlabha idam bahusam bhavante. Manusyam arthadam anityam api hadira. So we've been given this very rare opportunity to achieve the greatest wealth of life. So what is that wealth? It's the wealth of Krishna consciousness. So the human form of life provides one the opportunity to become aware of who they are spiritually. Atato Brahma Jignasya. Now is the time to inquire. But that inquiry can only be facilitated if there is an environment which is favorable to that inquiry. So we see in the material world, Krishna Bahiramoka, Bhoga Vanchakare, Nikatatasmana Mayatare, Japadiyadare. That because of the living entity turning away from Krishna, the living entity has been captured by Maya. And the primary thing that the living entity becomes captured by is Pumsa Striya Mityunani Bhavam Etam. One becomes captured by the sexual attraction. Woman becomes attracted by man, man becomes attracted by woman. And this is the primary thing which binds the living entity within this conception of life. And this is because in the spiritual world, the primary source of the primary rasa, the adi rasa, is the attraction between Radha and Krishna, which is completely pure and spiritual. So when that's reflected into the material world, it becomes inebriated, as Srila Prabhupada used to say. And it, instead of being the source of the highest levels of love and pleasure, it actually becomes the source of the most degradation and bondage within the world. This is the primary thing that's preventing the living entity from making progress spiritually, is attraction to the opposite sex. So the Bhagavad Gita explains Bhoga Shvarya Prasaktanam Taiha Pratitya Chetasam Vayase Atmika Buddhir Samudo Navadiyate. For those who are bewildered by Bhoga Aishvarya, they are unable to engage in self-realization or even spiritual inquiry with a determined mind. So in order to curb the enjoying propensity, Krishna has developed a divine system by which everyone can make gradual progress in the march, in achieving the ultimate goal of human life, and achieving the greatest wealth of the human form of life. And that cultural divine system which Krishna has given is the Varnashram system. Varnashram is meant to function as a background by which the entire human society can exist in society while simultaneously making spiritual advancement. And it takes into account the different psychophysiological dispositions that people have in this world, and it simultaneously engages them in the service of Krishna so they can make rapid spiritual advancement, although being conditioned by the material energy and although having material desires. It takes into account that everyone has a particular guna and karma, and it engages that guna and karma in such a way that one can be elevated instead of degraded. So Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that everyone is forced to act in this world. So he's telling Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, you act for me. So this is the whole purpose of the Varnashram system. The whole cultural background of Krishna consciousness is to facilitate the engagement in devotional service. The whole function of Varnashram is to create a cultural background by which people can easily practice Krishna consciousness. So the cultural background, it emphasizes certain attitudes and behaviors according to the type of conditioning one has, the type of body that one has, whether one's a man or a woman, or whether one has a particular propensity to work or a particular attraction to a kind of life. There are certain attitudes and behaviors that everyone has to uphold in order for the system to function properly and in order for everyone to take full advantage of the system itself. So every person is attracted to a particular kind of work, and Srila Prabhupada envisioned that the Krishna consciousness movement could create a cultural revolution within society by engaging these propensities in the service of Krishna in a natural setting, not by integrating into the society itself and adopting the principles and moral standards of modern society. The reason why Srila Prabhupada spoke so heavily against modern society, even if someone studies Srila Prabhupada's teachings in a superficial way, it's very clear that Srila Prabhupada is highly critical of modern society. So why was Srila Prabhupada so highly critical of modern society? Was it just that because he was bitter? No, it's because he saw through the lens of Shastra. He saw things according to what the Shastra said, and he simultaneously understood that modern society, it perpetuates the sexual attraction that's inherent within the conditioned soul. And it is fueled by the perpetuation of this attraction. If you look at music, if you look at social media, if you look at politics, economics, social, political, all the problems in the world, if you look at them very scrutinizingly, you can see that the underlying thing which is moving all these things ahead is the sexual attraction that modern society is currently emphasizing. In movies and music, all these things, the general populace is inculcated to believe from an early age that this is the ultimate goal of life. This is particularly found in the West, that this is the thing that one is supposed to pursue. So because this is made the ultimate goal of life, Natevadu Swartha Gatim Hi Vishnu, Durashraye Bahir Arthamaninas, that one's fixation in life is not situated on achieving the ultimate goal of Krishna, it's situated in the external energy of the Lord. So the ultimate result of that is Yehi Samsparsa Japoka Dukayona Ya Evate. What it happens is it creates a culture of suffering. It creates a culture of frustration, and it creates a culture of exploitation, which is completely diametrically opposed to the purpose of Krishna consciousness. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada explains that a civilization which rejects the religious principles which are being authorized by the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a civilization which should be considered demoniac. It is a civilization which is not functioning for the purpose of self-realization, but is functioning for the purpose of binding conditioned souls deeper into the bodily conception of life. This is why Srila Prabhupada referred to modern society as a polished animal civilization. Because people, although in the guise of human beings, are actually functioning no better than animals. And in many ways, they're actually behaving worse than animals. Because in the four needs of a materially conditioned soul, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, at least animals are regulated in their activities to a certain degree. Animals only mate once in a year, twice in a year. Animals only eat at once every 2 weeks for a tiger, a few times a day for elephants. They eat at particular times. But we see in the modern society that people are engaging in completely unregulated activities, and they're behaving worse than animals. This is the byproduct of a materialistic animal civilization. And we can see, practically speaking, from a secular point of view, that no one is satisfied within this society. The University of West Virginia conducted a study in which they found that 20% of Americans who are the acharyas in this particular way of life, 20% of Americans in society have either seen a therapist or are currently on psychological drugs, means like antidepressants, anti-anxiety. 20% of Americans, that's a large percentage of people that are taking these. And many people probably have psychological issues, but they don't take medication for it, or they don't approach a psychiatrist. So practically everyone in society is mentally disturbed by the propaganda that's currently being inculcated throughout society. And so Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that this society, what it does is it creates a consciousness where one becomes endlessly entangled in what Krishna says, asha pasha statayar bandha. He explains that one becomes entangled in an endless network of hope, hoping against hope, that one day I'll be happy, that one day by pursuing these abhorrent desires, which are completely obnoxious, will actually bring me satisfaction. Despite the fact that they've seen generation after generation after generation, no one's ever been satisfied by pursuing these desires. Still, there's a hope. Asha pasha statayar bandha. They become completely entangled in this network of hope. And that network of hope is solidified and is solidified through the propaganda which society propagates and through the activities of the leaders who are running that society. So we see that Srila Prabhupada's mood and mission, even from a superficial point of view, we can see that Srila Prabhupada is very critical of modern society. And he did not desire that the Krishna consciousness movement integrate in society. What he expected of the Krishna consciousness movement was a wholesale revolution of society. He expected the members of the Krishna consciousness movement to be leaders that would create a complete revolution within society and completely move the society in another direction, because he could understand that the modern society of sense enjoyment, of eat, sleep, and be merry, was diametrically opposed to the essential principles of Krishna consciousness. As Srila Prabhupada would often say in his purports and classes, Krishna consciousness and sense enjoyment go ill together. So all devotees that are practicing Krishna consciousness are undoubtedly magnanimous and wonderful souls. But a reality that we have to come to terms with is that practically no one, except for a few rare individuals, come to Krishna consciousness liberated. Although Krishna consciousness is a transcendental process, the people who come to Krishna consciousness are conditioned. So philosophically, we understand that everyone is part and parcel of Krishna. Mama ishvam so jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana. But simultaneously we understand manashastrani indriyani prakriti stani karsati. We understand, yes, everyone is a part and parcel of Krishna, but simultaneously everyone is conditioned by the material energy. And Krishna doesn't neglect that in the Vedas. Krishna gives a system by which people, although existing in the bodily conception of life, can be gradually elevated out of it. So this bodily conception of life, Srila Prabhupada once told Atma Tattva Prabhu. Atma Tattva Prabhu had a tooth infection, a toothache. And so because of this tooth infection, he wasn't able to brush his teeth. So when he got initiation, he came in and Prabhupada gave him his beads. And he said, you haven't been brushing your teeth. And Atma Tattva Prabhu said, there's an infection, Prabhupada. And so later, Atma Tattva Prabhu was waving the chamara fan next to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada looked up at him and he said, material life is an infection. So the bodily conception of life is like an infection, and Krishna consciousness is the medicine for that infection. But just as those who are highly infectious cannot remain in any particular environment in order to be cured, in order for the medicine to fully work, in the same way, in order to be elevated out of the bodily conception of life, there is an environment which is favorable to the practice of Krishna consciousness, and there is an environment and a culture which is unfavorable to the practice of Krishna consciousness. So Varnashram Dharma is like the environment, just like a hospital is favorable for the taking of medicine. An Ayurvedic clinic is favorable for the taking of medicine. The hospital itself and the Ayurvedic clinic are not the cure. One can't expect to go with a disease into a hospital and just sit there and not take treatment. That's not how it works. One has to go into the hospital and take the treatment in the hospital. So in the same way, within the context of Varnashram Dharma, it's not that that's the solution, because Varnashram is ultimately material. But it's favorable to the practice of Krishna consciousness. Although it's not devotional service itself, it is highly favorable to the practice of Krishna consciousness. And so because it's highly favorable to the practice of Krishna consciousness, devotees should be extremely eager to accept it and implement it. Anukulasya sankalpa pratikulya savarjatam rakshasititi vishvaso goprit vevaranam tata atmanikshepa karpanye sadvida saranagati. One of the 6 symptoms of surrender is to accept that which is favorable to devotional service. So although Varnashram Dharma is not devotional service itself, it's favorable to the practice of Krishna consciousness because it provides a cultural background by which people can practice Krishna consciousness very easily. And Varnashram Dharma takes into account the natural propensity that every living entity has, that you're conditioned in a particular way, so you act like this, you behave like this, and that according to how you've been conditioned, you can function in a very natural setting and have a very natural role. This goes for men, women, children. Everyone has a natural role that they can play in society. And when people act according to this natural role, when brahmacharis behave as brahmacharis, when grihastas behave as grihastas, when vanaprashas behave as vanaprashas, when sannyasis behave as sannyasis, this creates a very pure atmosphere. When men behave like men and when women behave like women, according to the injunction which Krishna has given in the Srimad Bhagavatam and which has been given in the entire Vedic literature, this creates an atmosphere of purity within society. And this creates an atmosphere in which many people can practice Krishna consciousness. So we see that Srila Prabhupada, in the history of the movement, initially when he was preaching, he emphasized the essential principles of Krishna consciousness because he could understand that people in the Western world weren't going to be able to adopt the cultural values immediately. But if we study Srila Prabhupada's teachings from 1965 to 1977, we see that he gradually began to emphasize the cultural subtleties of Krishna consciousness, which were favorable to Krishna consciousness. Initially, he emphasized chant Hare Krishna, chant, dance, take prasadam. But as time went on, he started to emphasize the different ashramas. He began to emphasize the separation of men and women. He began to emphasize the role that women play within a family life. He began to emphasize the duties of a brahmachari, the duties of a sannyasi. But simultaneously understood dealing with people that were coming from the West, that were so heavily influenced by the Western culture, it wasn't going to be something that he could implement within the short period of time that he had. Srila Prabhupada emphasized the most essential things, but in his books he gave everything. And we can see that in this purport. So Srila Prabhupada said that I've erected a house, now you fill in the details. So when Srila Prabhupada in 1976, when he was leaving Hyderabad with Hare Prabhu, they were leaving Vrindavan, going to Hyderabad. He was leaving with Tejas and Hare. He turned around and he said, now begins the second phase of our movement, Varnashram Dharma. Because he could see that despite the fact he emphasized the pure spiritual principles, because a cultural background was not there in order to facilitate the practice of that, many devotees were having difficulty following the 4 regulative principles. Many devotees were having difficulties chanting their 16 rounds. So Srila Prabhupada, being the magnanimous, compassionate acharya that he was, wanted to institute a cultural background for the society, the entire society to follow. So Srila Prabhupada was once asked, we have the perfect philosophy, the perfect spiritual master, the perfect way of life, but why is it that we still see problems in our society? And he said, it's because brahmacharis and sannyasis mix too much with the opposite sex. So we can see that the subtleties of Varnashram Dharma play a huge difference in whether we can practice Krishna consciousness in a peaceful state of mind. And when Varnashram is instituted on a large scale, and there's a cultural background to facilitate the practice of Krishna consciousness, a greater number of people in society can actually practice Krishna consciousness because it gives a viable alternative to the society that they're existing in. Many people say Krishna consciousness is impractical, the type of lifestyle you're living is completely, I can never see myself doing it. I meet many people in the West. They're good, honest people. They appreciate Krishna consciousness. But to practice Krishna consciousness within the environment of the culture that they're living in is extremely difficult. So unless there is a practical demonstration, a practical cultural alternative, a revolution within consciousness, a revolution within society by which devotees can display, this is the alternative that you can go to. You don't need to work a 9-to-5 job. You don't need to be influenced by modern politics. You don't need to be influenced by television, cell phones, and all these things. You can live a very natural, peaceful way of life, practice Krishna consciousness very peacefully, and go back home, back to Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada very much wanted to see a cultural revolution within society. He wanted to see the entire world become Krishna conscious. So we have to contemplate what is the vehicle by which that can actually take place. And the vehicle is there needs to be a practical demonstration of an alternative to the modern society, which is currently crippling and sapping the vital energy of the human form of the human life, and completely distracts them from the ultimate goal of life. When there's an atmosphere which is a practical alternative to the modern society, it naturally invokes a sense of inquiry. Why are these people so happy? Why are they able to live like this? And that inquiry will be the beginning of them engaging in the ultimate goal of the human form of life and inquiring into the nature of absolute truth, engaging in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan mission under the guidance of Srila Prabhupada and achieving the ultimate goal of life in this life now. So we can facilitate a wider number of people through this culture. And the more and more we see this culture become prevalent within the entire world, the larger number of people will actually be able to practice Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. So it's 9 or 8, 10, so I'll leave some time for discussion. So if there's any questions, comments, corrections.
Prabhu, despite the fact that you were born and brought up in a completely Western environment and culture, you have actually adopted this in a very most exemplary manner, the process of Krishna consciousness. And I wanted to understand from you, I also work with a lot of Western youth. I wanted to understand from you how me, from a person with an Indian cultural background, can help these young men and women adopt the process of Krishna consciousness even to a fraction of what you have done so far.
Well, how I became a devotee is I got a book. Srila Prabhupada, in his 7 purposes of ISKCON, he mentions various dimensions of preaching that he wanted to see. And he says the 7th purpose of ISKCON is all the distribution of transcendental literature which will fulfill the aforementioned goals. It will create a foundation for the aforementioned goals. So I personally feel that if we can create a culture of hearing and chanting, that is the foundation by which people can appreciate the values of Krishna consciousness. The thing is that the Srimad Bhagavatam is Tadvagvi Sargo Janatagta Viplavo. So Srila Prabhupada, he said that it can create a revolution within the impious lives of a world's misdirected civilization. So, in order for Western people to appreciate Krishna consciousness, just like Srila Prabhupada set the example with his preaching, it wasn't necessarily immediately through the medium of Varnashram Dharma. It was through the medium of Bhagavat Dharma, the essential principles of Krishna consciousness, chanting Hare Krishna, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So I feel that if from an early stage in their Krishna consciousness, we can create a culture of reading Srila Prabhupada's books within anyone who comes to Krishna consciousness. This is a universal principle, whether they're from India, whether they're from America, whether they're from Japan, whether they're from China, if you can create a culture of studying Srimad Bhagavatam, then all of these other principles will become very natural, especially when controversial subjects in Srila Prabhupada's teachings come up. We don't tiptoe around it by saying this comes from, Prabhupada's Scottish church upbringing in, old India, or that these are Prabhupada's material teachings. That's offensive to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada is a self-illuminous acharya. Any instruction that he gives is specifically meant for creating a revolution within society. If we say that Prabhupada's a Sanipani Bhakta, we should see not just his teachings half of the truth. We should see his teachings in total. Otherwise, we engage in a half-hen logic. So Srila Prabhupada's teachings, we have to see them and how they all connect. I've met many students on book distribution they read the Bhagavad Gita, they come across something controversial, and they come up to me. They say, I want to give the book back. I say, why do you want the book back? He said, it says this. And I say, let's talk about it. I sit with them for a half hour, and I explain, why does Prabhupada say women are less intelligent? Why does Prabhupada say that all these different things which are so controversial, why does he emphasize Varnashram Dharma? We have to be able to explain this in such a way that society can appreciate it, because it's not that Prabhupada's a chauvinist. It's not that Prabhupada is, a racist or anything like that. There is a scientific reason why all these things are said, and it's said out of compassion. It's said through the lens of Shastra. Everything that Prabhupada is saying is coming directly from Krishna. So we have to create a culture of hearing and chanting within Westerners, and simultaneously not tiptoe around controversial issues. We ourselves have to train ourselves to be able to speak about those things in such a way that Prabhupada's teachings aren't minimized, but they're glorified. And when Prabhupada's teachings are glorified, then Dharma protects those who protect Dharma. So when we make an effort to protect Srila Prabhupada's teachings, then Krishna from within the heart of those living entities can inspire them to accept it. But if we tiptoe around all these issues and try to minimize them, or say that they're only because of Prabhupada's time, place, and circumstance, or that they're material teachings, we commit an offense to Srila Prabhupada, and we stifle the movement, and we subject the movement to potentially falling victim to becoming an apasampradaya. So we have to understand how to speak about these things in such a way that people can appreciate it. And it's not that it's illogical, and it's not that it's not relevant. If one can explain all the elements of Krishna conscious philosophy, it's all logic, it all makes sense. Anyone can accept it, but one has to know how to explain it. So we ourselves have to become qualified preachers. But I would say that the main thing in order to convince people to practice Krishna consciousness is they have to develop faith in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they have to develop complete faith in the Srimad Bhagavatam. They can't get stuck on, I like your philosophy, but I don't like the culture. They have to see, why is the culture favorable to practicing the philosophy? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. It was a very wonderful lecture and very technically perfectly okay lecture, sticking to the point in this sloka. I appreciate your conviction and in the topic, and your practice of Krishna consciousness is very much inspiring to all of us around you. And now my question is that God said that I have bound these people with that my words in the Vedas.
Yeah.
But those are not visible to this material list attached people. So what we can do on this topic?
So I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question
That
completely.
words, God said that God has bound with
Okay.
these names and instructions in the Vedas and all that. But people, the materially attached people are not able to see that words, that bindings are not seen in the society.
Yeah, so if I've understood your question properly, that the verse is saying that people are bound by these words of Krishna regarding how to behave within the world.
Yeah.
But we see that most people don't know what those words are. So what about those people, right?
Yeah.
So actually, because people aren't following Krishna's words, you see the byproduct is the society that we're living in. Someone once asked me, a Christian asked me, he said, if your philosophy is so good and so pure, why is it that India is, so poor, so much disease, so many things. He gave all these material examples. It's kind of like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a Christian philosophy, like prosperity preaching. But I explained to him that if one understands the ultimate goal of life and one understands the proper cultural conduct to behave in, but they willfully neglect it, the byproducts, the reaction is even more severe. It's just like, if a child, for instance, let's say in like a court of law, a child commits a crime. Like he does something like very hideous, like murder or something, but it was done on accident. The child's sentence is reduced because of his innocence. He didn't know he was doing something wrong. So in the same way, if someone doesn't know that they're doing something wrong, the reaction isn't so severe. But when someone knows that they're doing something wrong, like for instance, if a police officer kills someone, I guess in America this example doesn't work, but if a police officer kills someone, the reaction is even more severe. Or if a high court judge abuses their position or something like that, the reaction is even more severe. Like if someone commits fraud within like Wall Street, but if then a judge commits fraud, a judge is punished even more severely because he's supposed to uphold the law and he's broken the law. So in the same way, when people know what the laws are but they don't follow it, there's reactions. But even if one doesn't follow the codes which are given by Krishna, even out of ignorance, the fact is they've been born into that situation, karmanam daiva netrena. They've been arranged according to their conditioning in a previous life. Shariram yadavatnoti yabshapiyu krama ishvaha grihe vaitani samyanti vayorkata ivashayat. That one has been carried to that particular circumstance of life, not by accident, but by the arrangement of Krishna. So they've rejected the codes of Krishna in previous life. So therefore they've been put into a civilization where they can perpetuate that. So the answer to your question is that one has to deal with the repercussions of not following the Vedic injunctions one way or another. So in that way they're bound. As Prabhupada says in this purport, those who follow the injunctions are liberated. Those who serve Krishna directly attain liberation. Those who serve Krishna indirectly through the material energy in rejecting those laws, they achieve it more gradually. So when one follows the principles which are given by Krishna, it makes spiritual life very easy. And it makes the society very peaceful. But societies which reject those teachings, in which there's no trace of the society, you can see the practical result is mental disturbance, physical disturbance, famine, war, so many problems. And this is what society is doing now. I hope that answers your question. Anyone else? Prabhu, you said something?
Hare Krishna. You were explaining about the Varnashrama concept. On the next part of Prabhupada movement, which he emphasized, towards the end of his earthly pastimes. Many devotees are trying, and like Bhakti Raghav Maharaj, especially I see when they have dedicated their lives for establishing this Varnashrama system. But on a practical level, we are failing in implementation. What you explained was perfectly right, but practical implementation isn't so easy. How do we apply that?
Yeah. I would say that there's great souls in our movement that can answer that question a lot better than I can. His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj is one. His Holiness Bhakti Raghava Maharaj is another. And Suhotra Maharaj has written extensively on the topic. And Shivaram Maharaj is a shining example of how it's possible in the West. So I think what it really comes down to, from my limited understanding, is that there needs to be a group of missionary-spirited grihastas that believe in the mission of what is supposed to take place. And they simultaneously have some type of skill and ability to live off the land without being dependent on society. They have some type of ability to do that to some capacity. And they can be the ones that can really set a foundation for it, I feel. That's what took place in Hungary. There was a group of about, I think, 5 grihasta couples that set the foundation for that project. And then Bhakti Vikas Maharaj in Gujarat has a similar model. That there's grihasta couples which are living off the land and making it happen. It requires a lot of sacrifice, and that's one of the reasons why it hasn't really unfolded the way Srila Prabhupada envisioned. Because there were mistakes that were made in the beginning, but it's not that it's not possible, because the instruction is there. I would say that it could be potentially a lot easier than we make it out to be, at least in the initial stages, and that it just requires becoming aware of the roles that men and women play within society, and then simultaneously being aware of the different roles that the ashramas play. And then beginning to contemplate how do we begin to train people in their varnas, because that is something that I feel is a bit far-reaching. The ashramas, and at least having purity in the principles of everyone's respective ashrama, is a very good foundation. Men behaving according to the way men are supposed to behave, and women according to the way that women are supposed to behave. This sets a really amazing foundation, actually. And then when it comes to training the overall society and the principles of varnas, that can come in due course of time. But Srila Prabhupada, he was a genius because he emphasized the training of brahmanas. So we have many intelligent brahmanas within our society. And I feel it's just something that needs to be discussed. It needs to be discussed, and we just need to think, how can it be done? And rather than thinking it's not possible, we should think how it can be done. And no matter the difficulties and challenges that may come in the process of implementing it, we should be willing to face those challenges, because we have to see the result of if it's implemented properly. More people can be affected by Krishna consciousness through the vehicle of Varnashram Dharma than any other kind of bridge preaching. Varnashram Dharma is the best kind of bridge preaching because it engages people of all different lifestyles and ways of life, and it can practically engage them in a community where they can feel nourished. But like I said, there's many great souls in our movement who have spoken about this, written about this, who are practically doing it in society. And there's examples that are existing. It's not that there aren't examples. There are examples, and there's very shining examples of it, actually. But we should see that it is in the grassroots stage. And something that Native Americans talked about that I heard growing up was that Native Americans, the way that they functioned, they were always thinking 7 generations into the future. So for something as big as Varnashram and the potential that it has to affect the entire world, we should consider that we're in a foundational stage and we're not necessarily going to see the full fruition of it. But we can at least begin to create models of, gurukuls, children being trained, and men being trained, women being trained from a young age in order to create that foundation for the future. So it's something that's going to require probably a lot of time to fully fructify. But because we're only into the first 50 years of our movement, we at least have to speak about it. We at least have to think about it, and it has to be within the forefront of devotees' consciousness. It can't be something we just put in the background. We have to think, we have to see that society is falling apart, and that Srila Prabhupada said that tens of thousands of people will come to our farm communities. So Rameshwar Prabhu brought this up in Los Angeles to my spiritual master once. My spiritual master said that we better get to work because we don't have anything yet. So when that society collapsed, we have to be able to shelter all those people. So we have to think about it, we have to speak about it, and we have to take guidance from those who are already doing it. That's my limited understanding. I'm not really qualified to answer such a question. But it's an important question that gets asked a lot, and I'm very grateful that you asked it because it's something we need to think about.
This thought process is perfectly all right, what you have said, and basically, I also felt what we require is patience and the conviction
Yeah.
and the faith
Mm.
in Prabhupada teachings,
Yeah.
and then it is not just a service of 1 to 10 years; it's a service of generations, and this should be, as you are concerned, it should be carried on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu, for everything that you do. So if anyone doesn't have anything to say, we can stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande, Haribo. Vande Nichaya Tinatam Pariyo Nipatya, Tetra Sakatam Sakaitar Handavim, Esara Sakalameva Vihayadira, Gauranga Chandra Charane, Thank you. Thank you.